Since the closure of the Great West Steakhouse in 2006, the London Roundhouse has posed somewhat of a question mark for the community. What would become of this building? Should we create a museum? Install another restaurant? Demolish the building entirely and start again? This podcast will briefly examine the fate that befell several other roundhouses in Canada, and ponder what fate could still befall the London Roundhouse. The London Heritage Advisory Council in 2009 began to investigate the heritage value of this building and its role in the City of London. While this report hasn't been released officially yet, it should be released in the coming years. What about the owners of the building? Well, Creative Property, the owner of the building, has pursued a number of options in the past 7 years. A quick Google search will produce several failed plans to turn the Roundhouse into everything from a new steakhouse, to a brew house, to a live workspace. Now let's look quickly at 3 different roundhouses in Canada and see what became of these buildings. The C&R Spadina Roundhouse in Toronto was built in 1928, and while Toronto's John Street Roundhouse was eventually purchased by Steam Whistle and transformed into a brewery, the Spadina Roundhouse met a different fate. Demolished in 1986 to clear space for the Toronto Sky Dome, little remains of this historic roundhouse except for photos and text in the Toronto Railway Historic Association Museum. The CPR Roundhouse in Vancouver, British Columbia, has served a number of functions in their community. In 1986, the building was used as a venue to host Expo 86. And since 1997, the building has functioned as a community center for arts and recreation. Lastly, the Roundhouse in the Three Valley Gap in Revelstoke, British Columbia, has been maintained as a museum and is one of the few roundhouses in Canada to feature a fully covered working turntable. Describing itself as a railway, roundhouse, and heritage ghost town, this museum seeks to educate patrons about the history of rail in British Columbia. While other roundhouses in Canada have either faced destruction or found niches to continue their existence, the London Roundhouse has been in somewhat of a state of limbo for the last 7 years. While our Traction and Atmos Marketing have discussed their dedication to preserving and restoring the building's heritage, I'd like to hear from you, London. What role do you think the London Roundhouse should play in our community? Do you think it should be a museum? Do you think it should be a commercial space? How best can we utilize this heritage building in our community? If you have any thoughts, please leave a comment on our YouTube page or write a comment on our Facebook page. We'd love to hear your thoughts.